Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott McKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
Hey there, welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast. So glad that you are here. We've got an incredible interview. Of course we do, because we're in industry and we've got just a plethora, and I don't even know how to spell that name, a plethora of options and interviews to share with you. This platform right here, the Industrial Talk platform, is dedicated to you, the industrial professionals, the companies that get it done. You are bold, you're brave, you dare greatly, you innovate, you're changing the world. We celebrate you each and every day on this podcast because you deserve it. And you're going to help us get through this challenging time. Let's get going. Yep, another great interview. Gentleman by the name of Brian Severski. He's with Infor. You might have heard that company. Talent science arm of that particular organization. And we're going to be talking a lot about driving productivity and performance with talent. And it doesn't just stop there. You know, the problems that we're dealing with today, right now, companies are just like, wow, what do I do, Scott? Talk to me about this stuff. And all this podcast is for is being able to provide real, tangible, actionable solutions so that we can get on the other side of this virus or whatever that might look like and be able to be innovative and do the stuff that we need to do to be a success. So we're going to be talking about maintaining productivity. We're going to be and strategies associated with it. We're going to be talking about retaining quality talent and strategies, of course, because the elephant in the room, there's a lot of people that are just sort of been furloughed or let go. So what do we do? How do we begin to hire the right people efficiently? And that's what this particular podcast with Brian is all about. But before we get going, the Industrial Talk podcast is doing, let me back up just a little bit. I've had a number of conversations with a number of companies, and there's some general themes that I'm pulling out of these conversations. And they all deal with, what do we do? How do we survive in this post-virus world? And rightly so. You should be thinking about it. Well, you should have been thinking about it a long time ago, but still thinking about it and strategizing on what we need to do. Now, the themes go around like, hey, let's collaborate. We don't have all the answers. We have to collaborate and provide the opportunity to work with your customers, your prospects, to determine and solve problems, the pain that exists. So we have to collaborate. The other component is, what do we do? How do we innovate? Because this has been a real bridge kicker, this whole virus thing. So we have to innovate. We have to do things differently. And that's not just innovation with technology, but innovation on how we look at our business and how do we evaluate the processes associated with our business and how do we create some sort of resiliency within the business. And now that's all good and dandy to do that and have that strategy. Now it requires to take action, right? You've got to take action. Those are the themes that are consistent with everybody that I've spoken to. Collaborate, innovate across the board, and then take action. And the last component of that is speed. You can't just sit there and say, all right, we've done this and we've collaborated, we've strategized, and we've been in this conference room, and then you go and break and you do nothing. We need to compress that time because we're all hurting in some way, shape, or form, and it's all global, right? So we have to compress that time. What do we do? The only thing that we really can do is collaborate, innovate, take action, and do it now. Speed. And that's the series that will be coming up on the Industrial Talk podcast. So now let's get on with the interview. Okay, Brian Severski, right? This was an incredible interview. And the reason for that is because one of the components is this human capital. Along with all those other things, the human capital, the impact that it's going to have on your workforce, the impact it's having today, this isolation, this desolation, this irrelevance. It's just a weird time, and it requires people to be strong mentally, but But how does that impact the company? And now Brian really addresses that, and he uses the technology and the talent science wing of Infor to be able to do that. And and now that's innovative, right? That aligns with what the themes have been, especially during this time within industry. And he just nails it, man. He just nails it time and time again. And we've got the great strategies to be able to share with you free of charge. No ifs, ands, or buts, right? And so it is really refreshing to listen to individuals like Brian and others within Infor of their passion, their desire, their focus on helping you succeed, especially now, and coming up with solutions that are truly make you resilient. So let's get going with the interview. Here's Brian Severski. He's with Infor. Enjoy. Hey, Brian, welcome to the Industrial Talk podcast. So glad that you made time in your busy schedule, and I know the walls are climbing in on you, but we're all in the same boat together. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Scott. Thanks for joining or letting me join you.
It's all it's timely. You listeners out there, we're going to be talking a lot about human capital again. We're going to be talking about strategies that we were, where we are today, maybe some strategies for action tomorrow. And Brian brings the truth bombs definitely in this particular interview. However, let's lay the foundation, Brian, a little bit about your background. Where do you come from and why you're such an incredible professional?
Sure. So I reside in Dallas, Texas. I've been with Infor for a little over 10 years after having joined via an acquisition. I'm our director of product management for one of our lines of business called Talent Science, behavioral talent analytics. Really interesting stuff.
Now, that was which is really interesting, especially today. We've got a disconnected workforce, and we still have to be productive. But it sort of brings out some challenges that we have today. And I know that Infor has that fantastic product. So let's pose a sort of a problem statement. What are we dealing with today as a whole, as an organization that, all organizations have been, cannibalized and sent home. So what are we thinking?
So I'll give you two views of it. One is that the present shock is a shock to our system, but we have these kind of shocks to our system every 5 to 8 years into our economy. So we are today in 2020 dealing with a global pandemic, but you could wind it back to other major examples in 2008, financial institution failures, mortgage-backed securities. We had a double punch in 2000 and 2001 with the dot-com bubble burst, followed by September 11th. And that's just in the last 20 years. It's important to build consistency into our businesses and into our workforces so we absorb these shocks. And so the companies that have done a really nice job planning for the future, having cash in the bank, having quality talent, not only in the organization, but on the bench, are weathering this storm. That doesn't mean that they're not impacted. But there's other companies that maybe did not plan quite as well, that did not have the quality talent in order to weather the storm quite as much. Absorbing those shocks is not something that you do in the moment. It's something that you plan for in advance.
Yeah, but the challenge that I saw is that nobody within their business continuity plan had global pandemic as a category. I can understand, let's say in Houston, flooding. Okay, that's impactful. Sure. Boom, hammered business, changed lives, but it was so regional. This is global, and this is sort of unique. But I think the reality is that the conversation has to happen today. I mean, we are where we are, whether you plan for it or not. Now is the time to plan for it.
Absolutely. Well, no one has a crystal ball. No one could have foreseen this particular event coming. No one knows what the next event will be or what will cause it, but that there will be a next event, I think we can all be reasonably certain. So in the realm where work is still is the direct connection to productivity, there the front lines of the organization, they're customer facing, they're sales, or it's talent designing tools and systems that lead to productivity. They're your engineers, they're developers and technology firms. People are still driving productivity. So ensuring you've got the right person in the right role at the right time is really key to business success.
So, and this is a question that has been posed by other companies. Right now, there's a furlough movement. Unfortunately, a movement to get rid of overhead. Quite frankly, right?
Yep.
And from a business point of view, let's say that is happening, and many business fall into the category of I wasn't prepared. It just wasn't. What do we do? Where do we go? How do we start? And then that future, what does that look like? How do I start? And I said, I got to cut my overhead. I don't have the cash in the bank, whatever it might be. What do I do?
So you're going to start by evaluating your current state. What do you have today? And in terms of people, right? If you're furloughing employees, you've got good talent. It's probably going to come back to you. Some of that talent may leave and go elsewhere. You've probably got some critical core staff, obviously still working, but evaluate your current state. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can look at their behaviors, you can look at their skills, you can look at their work experiences and history, but you got to ask that strategic question. Where do we think we're going to be? Again, no one's got a crystal ball, but where do we think we're going to be 30 days from now, 60, 90 days out, 6 months, 12 months down the road? And what do we need to be successful? And do we have the right people in our organization to help us move those big rocks?
See, and I think the point that I hear you saying outside of those are great and excellent, pearls of wisdom. However, I think you got to do it today. You have the capability of begin that evaluation, that ability to say, okay, I this is where we're at. What is our current state? What's our employee base? And in light of strategic future, where do we want to be? What talent do we want to have? And go from there, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So so do the evaluation now, projecting what you think you're going to need. There's a lot of smart people in business. We can make some really strong approximations along the way. Now, what a tool like Talent Science does is take some of the subjectivity out of the equation. So everyone's got an opinion. I've got an opinion. Scott, you've got an opinion. My boss has an opinion.
I got a podcast full of opinions.
and opinions are interesting, but at the end of the day, opinions are always flawed because they're based in subjectivity. And so as you're doing that evaluation and as you're doing that planning, root those elements in more objective anchors. Root them in data.
Give me an example of subjectivity. And how do you, you got to give me an example. What tools I can say, hey, that's and point at everybody. That's subjective. Let's get to the, how do I do that? What is that?
So it's not necessarily that there's a particular tool that is subjective. We just bring subjectivity to our everyday decision making, which is, by the way, why as a society, we are terrible at decision making. Look at retail return rates. Look at divorce rates in the country. We surround ourselves with tools to make better decisions, like Consumer Reports. So it's just colored by my history. An example of subjectivity is me walking in. Maybe I am interviewing someone to join a team that I'm working on, and I just fall subject to the similar to me effect. You went to the same school I did. You're interested in cooking like I am. We're fans of the same sports team. Because you are similar to me, and I think I'm good at my job, you must also be good at the job for which I'm interviewing you. That's great. Well, that's not true, but it certainly feels true in the moment.
But it's funny you bring that up because the first thing I did in preparation for this particular interview, where did I go? Yeah, I went to your LinkedIn stat card. And then I started going. I looked at all the. I scrolled down. You know where I went? Where did he go to school? Right there. I went right there, and I just said, "Oh yeah, and then boom. I do that naturally with every single interview. I try to find that commonality. And I didn't think of it that way. That's an interesting, because we just do that human wise. Like, yeah, I don't want to walk into a room and say, oh, I don't know anybody. I want to know.
Well, and there's different ways to approach problems and decision making as well. So for all the right reasons, you're looking for commonalities because you want to build some instant rapport. That's not unlike what we all do. Whether it's me walking into a retail store, or me interviewing someone, or me, I don't know, walking around a group of people maybe that I don't know so well and trying to become better friends with someone, we are specifically looking for those elements of similarity. Where do we have common ground? But if you're always looking through rose-colored lenses at your decision-making, you are invariably going to step in some mud puddles along the way. You're going to get lucky sometimes, but you're also going to get unlucky sometimes because you're not looking for those critical pieces that differentiate, is this a good decision or a bad decision? I'm just looking for what I think is the good.
Because I have, and truth be told, fallen into that category and experienced the pain on the other side of that bad decision, because I just, hey, all right, man, you like that? I like that too. You're hired.
Sure, we've all been burned.
So let's get rid of that subjectivity. We're doing it today, right? You guys can do it out there today. You listeners out there, if you're in a position, do it today. Figure it out and go through that process, because, geez, like Brian said, man, we're good people. We can make these decisions. Now, how do you get into the objectivity? What you're leveraging the technology, you're leveraging the tool. Where do we go from objectivity? What does that mean?
Yeah, no, so at that point you got to start to get outside of yourself, because I could try really, really hard, Scott, to be objective, but there are limits to what I'm capable of, because I'm a person and I have history and context that informs the way I see the world, the way I interact with people, and the way that I make decisions. There is a tool, plenty of data that we can pump into this particular tool to help take that subjectivity out of the equation, become more objective, because data does not have an opinion. So the way that our tool works is we're actually measuring your current employees and trying to understand what particular needle the members of our client family want to move in their business. It usually revolves around different measures of performance, different measures of productivity. But if we can get our hands on data that helps us identify who in your organization is helping to move that needle today, then what our science team does, a team of industrial organizational psychologists, is build statistical models that help us clearly and objectively understand who is very likely to help move that needle in your role and who is less likely.
See, that's a great point. So we look at data. You have to have, in data, you have to have some history. So you have to sort of create a baseline.
Yep.
Like, you got to start tracking it. And then you're able to say, okay, I want to create, based off of these points, greater productivity, whatever that measurement is, whatever it is, and you can measure it. And then you can realize I could be more productive with my team if I had this fulfilled or whatever and find and be very strategic in your efforts to find those individuals.
Yeah, so you bring up actually a really interesting point. So when you think about driving performance in an organization, we really look at it through two different lenses. One lens is person to role fit. So irrespective of others on the team, irrespective of the manager, what's the recipe of success, so to speak, for a particular role based on my behavioral preferences, my cognitive abilities? Am I going to be able to move the needle in that role? The second way we look at it is in the context of teams, because more work is being done in teams today than ever before. Hiring good people will get you far, but companies that have teams that work together, now they start to have a real competitive advantage. And so looking at a team, what are the behavioral similarities on that team? Where is everybody the same? Is everybody really social? Where are the behavioral differences? Where you find that you just don't have a lot of alignment, that can actually be really healthy for the team, because in that term we're talking about behavioral diversity. But there's all sorts of other interesting ways to look at it. Do you have most of the people on your team that are grouped in one area and then you've got one outlier? Think about it this way. If you've got everyone that tends to be really social, except for one person, and that one employee on the team is really not social, are you not giving that person an opportunity to present really interesting and possibly impactful items? But it all just starts with awareness. If we're aware of how we interact with each other, well, now we can approach the situation differently. If I'm a manager or a leader on that team, now intentionally I can draw out the positives along the way.
And I would imagine at Infor, you have probably stats that exist out there that say, yeah, we did this and we received or realized this type of benefit by just doing this, and you can apply or you can impart that wisdom to your clients or to whoever is interested in trying to optimize the value. I mean, this is interesting stuff. It's where do you and this is my question to you, where do you see it going? I mean, what's nirvana when it comes to that? Because it just seems like you're constantly, I mean, people are just very fluid. You get that. I don't know. That's the question. I don't know where it's going.
So when we think about talent, there's two major talent functions in an organization. There's the talent acquisition function, right? It's recruiting and selection. And at that point, it's all about making quality decisions and making those quality decisions as efficiently as possible. If it takes me a long time to find the right person, well, then I've got a lot of missed opportunity cost in the organization and a lot of lost productivity along the way. So it's quickly honing in on who's the right person and then get them on board. That other function in the business, and Scott, that realm is where talent science at Infor has lived for nearly 2 decades now. Selection down. The other place where we have lived a little bit and where we're continuing to get deeper. So as we think about the future is more and more on the other side of talent in an organization. It's not about selection. It's about managing the talent you already have. And so how do you coach and develop your good employees to make them even better in their role? How do you project? Oh, please. Yeah.
No. That's an interesting, because one of the challenges, once the individuals within the organization, and we talk about training and all of that, but like Infor and other companies, there's a very dynamic in and out type of rotation of individuals, and creating that culture and sustaining that culture is a challenge because it's a merry-go-round sometimes, right? So how do you do that? I understand the necessity to do it, but how do you maintain that culture to move forward and continuity of that? Because some people like,
yeah, so culture is really interesting and it's really complicated. So culture is usually driven by the top down, but even if it's driven by the top down, if you've got too much churn in your employee base, if your turnover is too high, then it's really hard to get the culture sticky and to get it ingrained. Now, what we have found is when you get the right person into the right role, your turnover also goes down. We have proven that over and over again with many companies that we've worked with. Not just in my history, but even before my time with this product. And so if you can bring some more stability by getting the right people in, and the reason why a lot of people leave, Scott, is, and this is not new, people tend to, they don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And when someone is ready for the next step in their career, if they can't figure out that next step in their view, that's when they're going to look outside your walls. So with our tool, and we haven't talked about this much, but it's what we call a one assessment approach. So we measure the person one time. We understand a number of behavioral dimensions, how conscientious are you, how disciplined are you, how ambitious are you, those type of things. But that's just you. Once we know who a person is, we can compare that person to a number of different, what we call profiles, but I referenced these statistical models earlier. They're benchmarks. I can compare you to multiple benchmarks and actually see not just how well you fit with a job today, but how well you might fit with other jobs in the organization. So now I can more quickly and effectively identify my high potential employees and project, you're going to be really good on this career path, maybe your career path of leading and managing people. Someone else might be really good on a career path of being just an expert individual contributor, going up the path of being a senior, maybe a principal level in a particular role. But when you start to do all those things, one, you're reducing your turnover. Two, people that really embody your culture and that excel at it, they're not just maintaining it, they're helping to perpetuate that with new people you go in. You're never going to eliminate all turnover. And by the way, some turnover is healthy turnover. There are bad decisions that still get made. But when you stabilize that workforce, that culture starts to not just exist, but be an asset that you can ring for value.
That's what I hear you saying is that, and listeners out there, I think you can start today. Right, you can start looking at your organization today, and with those valuable points and insights. So we're gonna have to end this because I can keep on talking about this stuff. Now, you listeners out there, you're in pain. Okay, we understand all that. Everybody else, this too shall pass. That is a reality. So let's start thinking about today, your company, the resources that you have in place, and begin a plan going forward to create some level of stickiness and resilience and getting the right people in the right place. And I'm telling you, hey, are you active, Brian, out there in LinkedIn?
Somewhat active. I'm out there.
I've seen your card out there. Reach out to him, okay? We're going to have all his contact information on the Industrial Talk podcast on his dedicated landing page. That's how special you are.
Love it.
Yeah. And so pen and paper real quick. We want to maintain productivity. We want to retain quality talent. We want to hire the right person, especially now. Let's figure out, we want to move that needle and increase productivity. And that's what Brian is all about. And the team at Infor, they know what they're doing. You need to reach out to him and find out more because, boy, we need to do it now more than ever. I'll tell you that much, right, Brian?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk podcast. You be safe out there. Stay away from that pesky virus. Okay, Brian?
Thanks, Scott. You too.
You listeners out there, stay tuned. We're going to wrap it up on the other side. You know I do that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
Hey, again, thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk podcast. That was Brian Severski. Here's the spelling, right? Severski. Infor is the company. Talent Science is the that little vertical that he works in, and they're passionate about your success. Go out to his stat card on LinkedIn. You'll be impressed with that. Go out to Infor.com. Find out more about that solution that they offer specifically now. I mean, you really need to look into it and see how it can work with you. Anyway, thank you very much again for joining the Industrial Talk podcast. A reminder, once again, we're going to be doing a series, and you need to think about this. You need to figure this out. It's gonna be soup to nuts. Trends that are taking place right now in my conversation is collaboration across the board, not just with suppliers and customers and prospects, just across the board to come up with solutions that really solve pain. Collaboration. Innovation, not just technology innovation, because that is important, but also innovate within your business model and the processes associated with it. The third one is take action. You can do all of that, but if you don't take action, meaningful action, and move forward, well, it doesn't mean anything. And then the last component, speed. Compress that speed. We've got to get going. We've got to and don't worry about being perfect. So thank you very much. Be bold, be brave, dare greatly. Innovate and change the world. That's what you're doing. Thank you very much. Be safe, and we'll talk later.